I'm Evelyn Dutrasac, and I'm so honored today to be with Pierre Riopel. Thank you so much for accepting to do the memory mapping with us.
Thank you very much for welcoming me. Thank you.
The first thing I'd like to ask you a bit about yourself. What's your credo, your passion, your values? What has led Pierre Riopel?
You know, strangely enough, it's probably towards the end of my career that I actually found a quote that really meant something to me. And said, basically, that's what I've been trying to do throughout my career. And the quote was from Nelson Mandela, and I'm going to read it because I don't want to get it wrong. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And when I read that, I said, there you go, that's it. That's what I've been trying to do. And it took 20 or 22 years or whatever to sort of be able to put my finger on it and say, that's what it is. Because education, in my mind, is changing the world, one student, one kid at a time, making the world a better place, right? Mandela talks about a weapon. I mean, I think we can sort of.
I was going to ask you about that. It touches me. A weapon. What a weapon?
It's strange, I think, in a sense, because we instinctively sort of think of a weapon as a gun or whatever, but it is a force, maybe, if we want to look at it that way. And that's how I interpreted it, because it can be very sort of warlike as when we use the word weapon. But what is one of those tools? And education is a tool that you can use to change the world.
It's a powerful tool.
Absolutely. And you're going to change the world, as I say, one kid, one student at a time in your daily interactions with these students. So if you ask me what my credo is or what my passion is, what a basic principle for me is, that's basically it, is that we can change our community for the better, because a change for a change is what it's worth. But a change in a positive sense of making my community a better place to live, a better place to, as I say, to live, to raise a family, to retire, whatever. Education is basic. Education is fundamental.
Why did you choose to become an educator? And what path led you to become an educator?
Well, that's a tricky question for me, and I'm going to respond by sharing a story with you. My father was a high school teacher. He was a high school principal as well. I had a lot of family members that are, educators and so on and so forth. And I remember thinking distinctly as I was doing my undergrad, I want to do something else. So honestly, I can say this now in retrospect, after 40 years or so, I really resisted. I wanted to do something else. I had thought about law at one point. I had thought about journalism. I really did not want that path for myself.
Why? Why not?
Because I didn't want people to say, "Oh, well, his dad sort of opened doors for him," and so on and so forth. I wanted to be my own person. I think that's basically what it is. And no disrespect to my father, but I wanted to do things sort of on my own, to show my autonomy, to show that I was able to do it. And I think that's why at one point I had contemplated going into some other field of professional activity. Now, here's a story. The story is that it was about mid-September, and I got a phone call from a local high school principal, and I'll spare you all of the details, saying, "I need a teacher. I have a schedule for you, and I'll be expecting you on Monday morning." So the whole weekend, I sort of seriously debated, am I going to do this? Do I want to do this? I don't want to do this. I'm just going to phone him and say, I don't want to do this. I'm not going to be there on Monday morning. And was convinced by some family members that maybe I should try it out. And if I really did not like it at that point, at least I could have said, honestly, I tried it and I didn't like it. And probably the strongest time of reflection was between 8:30 in the morning that first day and 3 o'clock that afternoon. Because basically what I was saying to myself is, do I like this? Is this all right? Does this correspond with what I want to do in life? And at the end of the day, I asked to see the principal, and he found a few minutes in his schedule to meet me. And I said, I will be back tomorrow morning. And he grinned and said, very good, I'll expect you. And probably at that point, that's where I came to the conclusion that, you know what, I really like being around kids. I like this, and I see the leadership qualities that I can use within a classroom context or within a school. I felt even in that first day, and I was very honest with the students. I said, you know, this is my first job, never done this before, and they were very, very kind. We got along wonderfully well together. Anyway, in my mind, I still meet some of those kids in the community today, and it's a lot of fun to see them. And I said, we knew, monsieur, we knew you were just a young puppy, but, you know, it went well. And I think there was mutual respect as well in the classroom, as much my respecting the students as the students respecting me. And said, you know what, I'm going to do the best that I can with what I got.
You were honest. You were very honest with them.
Quite simply.
And they understood that.
Yeah. And as I say, I'm thinking of one of those students in particular who, you know, writes me maybe once a year or so. So, hi, monsieur, and they still call me monsieur. I think that's hilarious. But hi, monsieur, how are you doing? You know, what's new? Or the same student will say, did you see this in the news? And just the fact that I have students reading the news, because I taught history, social sciences, and that type of thing. We used to do a lot of work on reading newspapers and so on, and sort of summing things up in a couple of paragraphs, analyzing and allowing them with those exercises of becoming citizens and making their mind up on what they agreed with and what they disagreed with, and expressing their opinions.
If you met a teacher today that's teaching today, and I know we've had COVID, and you know that has been tough, what would you say to a teacher today from your experience?
Develop those human relationships. Work on that, because that's what your job entails. There's a lot of knowledge that's going to be shared, and there's a lot of you'll be working on competencies, for instance, in the classroom, and so on and so forth. And that's all the sort of pedagogical aspect. But there's also the human aspect of who are these kids, and letting them know who you are, right? And you've got good days and you've got bad days like everyone else, without being a non-professional. But I think that you want to build on that. I taught for a few years, and then came back home, because I was in Toronto for approximately 6 years, if memory serves me well. Came back to Sudbury to the School of Education, the French Language School of Education, l'École des Sciences de l'Éducation, and taught there for 5 years. And I had thought that in the long term, I wanted to teach at the School of Ed. Had started a doctorate. I already had my master's from U of T. I had my undergrad. I had my teaching certification. In the meantime, I sort of went on and did principal's qualification course. Started my supervisory officer's qualification as well. And I started my doctorate, and I completed all of my required course load. And at one point I said, I'm not sure I want to get involved in a doctorate. I mean, we all know how long that can take. It can take 5, 6, 7 years or whatever. I wasn't there. And what I wanted to do was go back to a school, be with kids. So that's why I became a high school principal for a couple of years, and then eventually made it to the board as a supervisory officer and director of education, and eventually retired as president of Collège L'Oréal.
What are the passions, the strengths, the rewards, and also are there any struggles or challenges that you've had as an individual being in the educational field?
I think the rewards or the things that my positive takeaways, let's do it that way. It's the relationships with your former colleagues, and I'm thinking of some of them that I've been in contact with just in the past couple of days. We worked, so closely together for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and then you're not in that work environment anymore, and you've either moved on or you've retired, but you've still kept those memories. And most of these people, I would say, it's like I had seen them just a couple of days before, when we messenger or we give a call or so on and so forth. So as much, for my colleagues, and I call them kids, your students, it's all of these relationships, and it's the network that creates that's absolutely incredible and very, very powerful. One of the committees that I enjoyed the most was what is called a judicial advisory committee, and I was there for 4 years. That's the maximum that you can serve. I might have changed, but and the job of the committee is to recommend to the Minister of Justice, and this is at the federal level, recommend to the Minister of Justice appointments to the bench. And so this was in the legal world. I had taught law in high school, but it's not quite the same thing. This is a whole other world with its own vocabulary, its own acronyms, its own, language. It's a whole new culture. But I realized that with all of the HR experience that I have from the school board, we received applications. So we had to read applications and sort of from a list, sort of say, okay, well, what are the skills that we're seeking? What about this candidate? What about that candidate? And then have this discussion as a committee, and then move the file forward or not. I was a board member for EQAO, for instance. I was on the Ministers' Advisory Committee for Francophone Affairs provincially. So it was locally, provincially, and federally. And locally, mostly involved with the University of Sudbury, for instance.
Oh.
I've been a board member there now for 12 years. I've been chair since 2017. So I mean, that with everything that has happened in the university world and in this area in Sudbury over the past couple of years, it has been a challenge.
What advice would you give to the younger generation?
I've got 3 things that I would say. First of all, seek advice. Don't be afraid to do so. Seeking advice is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. It's because you want to take the right decision for you, but consult a former teacher, consult a colleague, consult a family member, consult a business person in your community. It doesn't matter. Just consult somebody you trust and say, this is the question I'm asking myself right now. Can you help me out? My second advice would be to read. Take time, take half an hour a day, whatever, read. Don't do like I did in the sense of right now I'm sort of trying to catch up and read all of the things I should have read. In my life, I've read a lot, and I read a lot in high school and university, but now I'm reading the things that I want to read. And the last thing that I would suggest is to take time for yourself. The activity is not important. Whatever you do that's not the important part. Is take time for yourself. If it's that half hour because you want to go swimming, you want to go for a walk, you just want to sit there and vegetate and look at the fire, and vary those activities, but take time for yourself. It's like a little bit like taking a daily holiday. Looking
on your life, all your path in life, is there something that you would do differently?
The one thing that I would do differently is that I would take care of myself more. I know this is going to sound a bit odd because we've all had this advice. It's important to have breakfast. It's important to eat lunch, and it's important to have dinner. For years, I would have coffee in the morning and then run on the caffeine and then have supper at 5:30.
And what do you cherish the most?
What I cherished the most was the time spent with students and colleagues and those relationships. And with your questions, I go back into experiences, and I'm thinking of traveling to Europe with a couple of groups of students, and that quality time with these students, sitting on a plane, how many thousand feet over the Atlantic, and having a conversation and just being human.
I really appreciate your exchange, your sharing of your life with me, and I see there's gratitude,
Yeah.
there's hope, and there's love for the kid, the child, for the community.
Absolutely.
I'm really grateful that you shared your life, part of your life, important parts of your life. Merci beaucoup.
My pleasure. Merci. Merci, Blin.